good, it has fish in it, and it...
Hello everybody, welcome back to Starbound FRACKIN Universe. This video is not going to be a full-scale episode. I just wanted to talk about the series, what I liked, what I disliked, etc., while we finished up one last task, crafting the Atom Smasher. And then maybe afterwards we can blow everything up, because why not? I still needed one more Elder Artifact, so I ran Delta Freya 2 one more time in order to get what I needed. After that, I crafted the Atom Smasher, which ended up being a pretty extensive endeavor. Seriously, this thing is arguably the most expensive and intricate recipe in all of FRACKIN Universe, requiring all sorts of stuff, including 20 neutronium rods and 20 anti-neutronium rods. However, once I had it in my hands, I tested it out in the first precursor biome I found, and was pretty happy with the firepower on this thing. It's a shame they only get it this late in the game. I ended up upgrading it using all of my essence, which transforms it into the very ominous sounding Deus Smasher. I tested its firepower on a few instanced boss enemies, finding that everything melted pretty quickly.
Now that's a lot of damage!
I wanted a real bullet sponge, so I went back to Delta Freya 2 another time to fight the Shoggoth with this thing. On the way, I realized that the stupid liquid puzzle right before the boss room has a chance to spawn with lava instead of liquid obscura, which makes the entire puzzle take 5 times longer because fuck you, that's why. FRACKIN devs, please fix this. I see no reason why this thing needs to take any longer, it's absolutely stupid. Anyway, Shoggoth literally melted in seconds, making this arguably the most powerful weapon in the game, at least in FRACKIN Universe.
God, is that a class 3 firearm? Are those level 4 plates?
Right,
well, see you later.
God. Once I got back to my ship, my crewmates looked at me with happiness as I returned, but soon their joy turned to abject terror as I pulled out my Deus Smasher and began obliterating my ship, each crew member either falling into the abyss of space or dying instantly and beaming away once their crew beds were destroyed by my laser. After my ship was gone, it was time for my base. It didn't last much longer, and once it was adequately reduced to nothingness, my character took their helmet off and sat down on the ground, finally embracing the madness of the cosmos for the last time. I finally turned into a cringy Joker meme.
Society.
While you watch the rest of the footage I recorded and never got the chance to use, I might as well cover this series in retrospect, sort of like an epilogue of sorts. The first thing I wanted to point out is that while this series might seem short, I put a tremendous amount of effort into this thing. It might have only been 3 episodes, 4 if you count this video, but this series is a culmination of roughly 200 hours of game time in Starbound, as well as countless hours spent researching the game, recording gameplay, re-recording gameplay because my PC is a piece of shit and likes to corrupt stuff randomly during the encoding process in OBS, in-game technical problem solving because Starbound is a buggy mess, writing the scripts, trimming the scripts because I wrote too much, recording commentary, re-recording commentary because I hate the sound of my own voice, gathering copyright-free music, editing the videos themselves was probably another 10 to 20 hours per video, and then finishing touches like thumbnails and descriptions. Contrary to what jackasses who do not understand this creative process might think or say, recording, editing, and uploading are not the only steps in the process of making YouTube content. I'm sure there are channels out there that make quote lazy unquote content where they just talk to a camera for 12 minutes and then slap on an intro and an outro in Windows Movie Maker and call it a day, but that's not how I roll here, and if anyone says otherwise, they can go fuck themselves. Also, there's nothing wrong with those kinds of videos. I love Critical and Philip DeFranco, and anyone else who just sits there and talks to a camera for a couple of minutes. It's a perfectly fine form of content. However, these kinds of people do get under my skin. It's like they physically can't comprehend the fact that the production crew in the media industry does anything. I do understand that these kinds of uneducated and dumb people are dwindling in number as time goes on, but that doesn't mean that it isn't incredibly annoying to have to see this shit in the comment sections whenever I go on the internet. Anyway, it might seem like a lot of this is very easy stuff, but this is a pretty extensive effort on my part, And I do very much appreciate anyone who has watched this entire series, because this was unlike anything I had ever done. I actually got my year in review from Steam as I was recording this video, and it turns out that 10% of my total game time in 2023 was from STARBOUND alone. That's pretty nuts considering that I play a lot of video games. What's even funnier was looking at the chart of the entire year and realizing that I also played a lot of STARBOUND back in February. You know, when I was recording my first attempt at making this series. I mentioned way back in episode 0, where I was quote-unquote reviewing FRACKIN Universe and STARBOUND as a whole, that I was attempting to draw inspiration from and, in some cases, emulate other content creators because I absolutely love this format of content and I've never made it myself. I did try to put my own spin on this kind of thing and not just carbon copy Seth's Zine-Tac, contrary to what some of you might believe, and yes, I'm still angry about this comment even though it was 2 weeks ago. I wanted this to be at least remotely unique from anything that you've ever watched before, and I do hope that I hit the mark here. Maybe I am just a Seth wannabe copycat, even though I take far more inspiration from Dosh Doshington or Martin Cedo Pants. Maybe I am a copycat, but it doesn't really matter. I like this format, and although I might be tweaking it a bit in the future, I think I'll be sticking with it for quite a long time. So, let's get back on topic, STARBOUND. Let's just quickly rattle off some of the things that I missed out on or didn't do early enough to take advantage of. Guns. I still don't like them. I wanted to try something new, so I tried my best to pretty much only use guns this entire playthrough, because I normally stick to melee in STARBOUND. I gotta be honest with you, with a few exceptions like the Atom Smasher, guns seem to be pretty underwhelming. Melee just flows better with my playstyle. I don't know if it's the fact that I play on Zoom level 3 most of the time, so I feel pretty close to my enemies. I don't know if it's the energy management that I have to worry about. I don't know if it's the projectile spawn issues and not being able to hit enemies right up on top of your face. I just don't know. I've tried using almost exclusively guns this entire playthrough, and I still don't like them. If it makes you feel any better, I also dislike a lot of the other ranged weapons that I tried out, like Magnorms as well. I think if I play STARBOUND again, I'd like to be able to go back to melee, but also try to use some of the stabs and wands, because I think that there probably are some cool ones out there that I never got to try. Shields. I still like them. They are very useful, and not just for blocking attacks from enemies. You can do a lot with them. They are very versatile. You can cheese the Arceus horror fight by blocking the laser beams as you travel around the room. Same with pretty much any obstacle or trap in challenge rooms or instanced content. If you just hold your shield up and face vaguely in the direction of where the damage is coming from, you can negate it pretty easily. Shields are awesome, and FRACKIN Universe even adds new shields to the game that grant special stats like HP regen or energy regen, and even new mechanics like the shield bash, which allow you to basically punt enemies away from you if they get too close to you when you start blocking. Now, perfect blocking is still an awful mechanic, and I wish that there was a mod that made it not as awful, but everything else about shields are very nice. I wish I used them more instead of trying out two-handed firearms in this run, but, you know, whatever. Madness. I really wish that I got into Kevin's quests a lot sooner and handled the madness research a lot earlier on. There's a ton of useful stuff in the metaphysics tree that I just didn't have access to in the game when I absolutely should have. Neuropsionic generators, unironically, would have been pretty useful earlier on when I was getting into madness and electricity. The duplicator machine also would have been a lot more useful earlier on. I also wasn't really a fan of the madness system in general, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. A planet-side base. I should have built it much sooner than when I did. Space stations are convenient, but you lose out not just on research points, but also on atmospheric condensers and a liquid of your choice to use in automation in the form of the core. Honestly, next time I play, I'm probably just going to skip a space station and go straight into building a base on a planet, probably a temporary one on a barren or tabula rasa planet, and then move to somewhere higher tier later. Speaking of automation, I should have gotten into full-scale automation a lot earlier. I was still manually inserting and removing shit out of my machines up until I built my planet-side base. That's absolutely not acceptable, and I really should have invested some time and resources into creating a full automation system a lot earlier than when I did. It would have been far more convenient for me in the long run. By the time I had this set up, I was already like 98% done with the game. I really only had some instanced content and the Atom Smasher left to handle. I should have done this pretty much as soon as I had access to ITDs. The Colony Management System. I didn't use it this time because I'm stupid. It might tank your FPS, maybe, But having a massive colony generating resources for you is something that I was sorely lacking in the early game on this playthrough compared to my first character. In the endgame, you also do get free psi energy from the psionic harvester, sure, but even in the early game, the free research from the camera network, the free plastic and paper from the recycling center, the community garden can become a powerhouse for growing a single type of crop, the blood bank creates a bunch of useful chemical materials, and the drug diffuser creates even more research, as well as madness. All of this stuff combined together can make a well-built, efficient colony a tremendous bonus for any player in pretty much any stage of the game. I absolutely should have built a colony. Instanced content. I should have done this a lot earlier. It's a good source of loot, which can be researched in a computer if you need the points, and first-time completion bonuses are nothing to sneeze at. I really should have been hunting down strange maps on planets or even spamming out inspired paintings on the easel, because apparently those can also give you a chance to get a strange map with a new instance mission. I only ever did like 6 of these, but I really should have been doing all of them. Yeah, it kinda sucks when my PC runs like ass in some of the bigger missions, but completing all of them once is 100% worth it. Bees.
I'm feeling beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
I never got into any of the apiary stuff, and that kinda sucked, honestly. It would have been nice to invest in an alternate source of resource generation, because some of the stuff that bees can do is pretty bonkers. While the most useful material that you could get out of doing this was arguably diamonds, you could also generate iron with a special frame, or other resources like all the crystal types, or the elemental extracts that I never seem to have enough of, or volatile powder, or even elderstone and unstable particles. You could also breed special bees that granted access to unique furniture, or wax that could be centrifuged into phase matter. Honey, and a fair bit of the more unique resources resulting from bees, were also used in our next topic, alcohol. I never got into brewing, but apparently some of the liquors that you can research and produce are pretty useful. Not to even mention that I never spent any time getting the Miracle Ambrosia liquor, which can be used to create a very interesting set of armor and upgrade to the flesh set called the Eldritch Flesh set. Now there's a lot of good bonuses on this set of armor, but the most interesting to me is the Genesaberry effect. Eating a Genesaberry heals you for 85 HP over 2 seconds, or roughly 40-ish HP per second, and also grants you a severely reduced hunger drain effect. Very useful on its own, but if this Eldritch Flesh set gave you a permanent hunger reduction and 40 HP per second, it would be absolutely fucking busted. It does require heavy investment into both madness and liquor brewing, and even bees, but once you have access to the Miracle Ambrosia alcohol, this set seems pretty good, assuming that it does work as I think it does in my head. I never got to test it out in game, and I unfortunately can't seem to find any posts on the internet about what the set bonus actually means. Mechs. I never even researched any mechs in this playthrough. I never built any mech past the bare bones needed to enter my space station for the first time. I never did any of the anomalies that can spawn in solar systems, and I never even touched mechs at all this playthrough. And it would have been interesting to at least try out some of the endgame mech parts and weapons, because FRACKIN universe does quite a bit. Crew members. Holy fuck do I hate crew members. These idiots are pretty much as good as a meat shield and nothing else. I exclusively use them as tanks. In the beginning, I thought that I needed to be the tank and guard my party members, but it turns out that field medics heal themselves faster than almost any enemy can kill them. The only time I ever lost a field medic crew member was to environmental damage like lava or poison, or falling down into the core of a planet and dying instantly. They also just sometimes don't do anything. Like, they have fully automatic guns, and they just sit there and look at enemies sometimes, and not attack them at all, so they aren't even adding much to my DPS. Honestly, they just kind of get in the way if you're trying to build anything as well, so it's best to just leave them on your ship and only take them out into instanced content. If I ever play Starbound again, I really need to find some kind of mod that improves their AI or something, because they really are not pleasant to try to use in game. Airlocks. I don't know why I do this. I installed this thing on my ship and even used rudimentary logic gates with a delay to create some sort of airlock to jettison myself and crewmates that got too close out into the vacuum of space. Fun fact, I never used this fucking thing even once in this entire playthrough. Over 150 hours of playtime on the save file, and I built the ship within the first 10 or 15 hours, mind you, and I never used this fucking thing once. I guess I would have been more inclined to use it if I had a viable mech for mining in the asteroid fields, but still. It obviously doesn't hurt to have one of these installed, but I still thought that it was absolutely infuriating when I realized that I never even used this once. Now we can move on to some of the more detail-oriented aspects of Frackin Universe, stuff that I'd like changed because I wasn't a fan of it. The madness system, I really don't like it. I think it's gimmicky as hell. I think it takes too long to get started, which makes doing it right off the bat kind of tricky. I think if you play as a Thelusian, that you're removing one of the easiest ways to gain access to madness, the Atropos atmosphere. I think that Protheon is so fucking rare that giving the players a punishment for stacking it makes madness even more of a pain in the ass. And if you get past all of that, if you actually start building madness, you find that the research involved is, like, not equivalent in their reward structure. What I mean by this is that some of the nodes in the metaphysics tree are hot fucking garbage and don't matter at all, but others are completely necessary and vital to the progression of the game, so you can't even skip madness if you wanted to play a character without it because you need shit like the neutronium rods or dark and red matter. Not to even mention that you can't stockpile any madness easily like research on the holodisc system. The only way to gain lump sums of madness easily is by converting those special elder items, which only drop from elder enemies and loot chests in elder biomes or dungeons, by the way, and you cannot get them anywhere else. I don't know, I wasn't a fan of the madness system. I felt that it was too inconvenient to gather on your own, but it was also like inopportune because you get massive amounts of it randomly. I landed on a gas giant one time and went insane almost immediately for some reason. I don't know if it was the colliginous gas that I was breathing in, even though I had gas immunity on my armor, by the way. I don't know if the atmosphere of the gas giant was madness inducing on its own, like an Atropos biome. I don't know. Madness is one of those things that you find difficult to target specifically and gather large amounts of if you don't know what you're doing, but you also get a bunch of it when you don't expect to or when you don't want to. It's annoying to deal with, especially when you factor in the list of insanity effects that you have to contend with. Seriously, some of those effects are complete and utter bullshit. I'd like some better protections against madness effects in the later game, while also giving players some easier ways to get into the system. Also, remove the stupid Prothean negative effects, they're counterintuitive anyway. Processing machines. It felt like processing blocks and liquids in the endgame machines almost gives you too much, to the point where I had like 15 stacks of hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen, and I was struggling to find a use for them besides just selling them for a small stack of pixels. I'd like some sort of material sink in the endgame, maybe a way to transmute large quantities of these base chemical elements into something more useful, or maybe a nitrogen-cooled add-on to batteries that allows them to store more electricity, or oxygenated fertilizer, or low-tier hydrogen explosives. Just something to make me not feel like processing everything is a waste of time, because it kind of feels like it is towards the end of the game. Power generation. It seemed like endgame power gen was kind of lame. We didn't have anything interesting besides the neuropsionic generator, and that thing is not able to be automated easily unless you had a colony going, with the psionic harvester thing or whatever, creating free psi energy for you. Frackin devs did not add in a fusion reactor of any kind for sustainable and easy power, something like a hydrogen reactor. The precursor reactor was so rare, even though it did not create enough power nearly for its rarity. If the devs wanted to keep the current power rates for generation and consumption, the least that they could do was at least give us the ability to craft the precursor reactor once you find it for the first time or something. I don't know, it felt just kind of like the endgame power options were lackluster. Unless you're on the right planet, solar and wind just don't physically work, and nothing else seems ridiculous to use en masse. I am absolutely flabbergasted by all the designs I see of people online who just drop down 15 quantum generators and somehow automate deuterium or whatever to keep that shit running. That's a level that I don't think I'll ever need to reach. Strange sea planets. I mentioned this earlier on in the series, but I actually installed a mod that reverted the change of the Frackin devs of making strange seas completely random, both in what the liquid spawns on in the ocean, and what the weather effects or block types that can spawn, among other things, by being randomized. Basically, strange sea planets used to be an unknown planet type, which made them difficult to handle until the later stages of the game, but they also provided plenty of pretty insane rewards if you somehow did manage to conquer them. I said that this was a dumb change and I couldn't have been more wrong. This was absolutely removed for a reason by the Frackin devs. You see, I only ever traveled to, 5 to 10 different strange sea planets, and the most useful thing that I found on that planet was Mercury, which might not sound that useful in the first glance, but Mercury can be stuck into a refinery to basically generate infinite numbers of pixels. I had access to this at roughly tier 4 of research and equipment. It is way too early to have an infinite source of mercury at that point in the game. Mind you, this was not even the most insane liquid I could have found. Could you have imagined if I had found something like liquid iron, or liquid aqueous fuel, or essentia obscura, or even oil?
No, I heard oil! That shit is mine!
I mean, the game would have just been over by that point, and it would have been immensely boring to keep playing. However, on the other hand, FRACKIN devs absolutely should add in more planet types, specifically some of the more ocean planet types, to give us more access to this stuff and not leave it up to mods that revert their balance changes to just pure RNG. How about a liquefied crystal ocean planet? We already have a crystalline planet type. Why don't we have a crystal ocean type? That'd be awesome. How about a planet that is literally one giant ass beehive planet filled with bees and hive blocks, and at the core of the planet is a core of a random honey type? There are multiple honey types, so this would encourage repeat visits to the planet to find the one that you like. I know that we already have a ton of new planets, but there's nothing wrong with variety, FRACKIN devs. Technical issues. I had so many goddamn issues trying to keep STARBOUND from falling apart at the seams, you have no idea. I barely touched on some of these issues during the episodes because I would have ranted for minutes at a time about complete and utter nonsense. Items disappearing out of my inventory, or some items somehow getting transformed into the perfect cube item, which I guess STARBOUND uses for any item without an item ID. I don't know how this happens, but I had to fix lots of these issues by just spawning in items using admin commands, which I was not a fan about. I've also had intermittent issues with STARBOUND just refusing to close, or STARBOUND acting awful when I saved and quit to the main menu, and then re-entered my save game to keep going. This was mainly to remove item entities on the ground because they cause lag. Lots of times, STARBOUND would just crash when I tried to do this. Other times, it would cause even worse issues like the aforementioned item conversions or disappearances. I mentioned the FPS issues really early on, but those were mostly fixed after turning off VSync in the config files. I did have this strange issue with FPS drops at the outpost whenever I went there for no reason. I also had terrible FPS drops whenever my ship landed on very specific certain planets sometimes, though I could never find a way to replicate this consistently. I also had to get my save file corrupted, again, in the middle of the second episode, and it took me an entire day and a half of work to fix that. I didn't mention this during the episode because episode 2 was already pretty long as is, so that got cut out during the final draft of the script for that episode, but I'm saying that here for posterity. I somehow fixed it and rolled back my save file a couple of days, but imagine if that didn't happen. Imagine if my second attempt to play through modded STARBOUND also resulted in a corrupt save file that I could not physically recover. I mean, that would have been another spit in the face, right? At that point, I would have been out, like seriously, like never played STARBOUND again out. I would have quit like MatPat in a fit of rage if that shit happened not once, but twice, because this game is a buggy piece of shit. In any case, I had a lot of issues, more issues than even a poorly optimized Bethesda game like Skyrim Legendary Edition or Fallout 4. Seriously, the fact that STARBOUND feels less optimized than a Bethesda game is a testament to Chucklefish's own earth-shattering incompetence. Now, contrary to all the issues that you just heard that I had to deal with, I actually do want to play through STARBOUND again at some point. I'm absolutely not going to play again until my new PC is built. I am in the middle of building an absolute monster of a gaming rig, and I'm probably going to make a video about it soon enough, so expect that. But I just had so many goddamn issues from a technical standpoint during this playthrough that I need not only a vacation from STARBOUND, but also a stronger rig to play it on. I also want to add some of the content mods that I cut for stability purposes, like Arcana or the Shellguard mod. I also want to get into bees and alcohol. Maybe I make my base on an asteroid field instead of on top of a liquid uranium core, that'd be kind of interesting. Anyway, that's going to be a while in the future. I still need to build my PC first, and I also just need a break from STARBOUND for a little while. I put hundreds of hours into STARBOUND last year in order to record this series, and while I'm happy that it's over, it's hard to not imagine myself doing things differently next time. In any case, if you've watched this entire series, again, thank you. I put a lot of effort into it, and I hope you're excited to see what I play next. I do have a few games on my list that I'd like to make into a series similar to this one, though hopefully not as detailed and time-consuming. They would be more like that first STARBOUND video, more of a review-style video, and not a full-scale series, though I am not averse to doing something like this again in the future with a different game. Who knows? Also, if any of you have recommendations for what you'd like to see on the channel, please leave them down in the comments down below. I do have an extensive list of games, as I mentioned earlier, that I do plan to make videos about at some point, either on this channel or on my second channel, that are reserved for less edited content, but if I see a recommendation that I don't have, I will totally check it out. With all of that out of the way, thanks for watching. I hope I see you again next time.